Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Matt. So today we're continuing series The Unported Playlist, where I take a look at my favorite unported arcade games of all time, but we're in the middle of Janktoberfest. We're going to be taking a look at Dragoon Might from Konami, released in 1995. Now Konami's track record with arcade fighting games is definitely not golden. They are and also ran pretty much all of the time outside of games like Battle Triss, which I absolutely love, and something like Fighting Bujutsu, which is also a great game. When it came to 2D fighting games, Konami always tried to compete with Sega, Capcom, and every other developer, and they always struggled, and Dragoon Might is no different. Before you get too involved, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. But off the top, Dragoon Might is a very pretty game. Konami's artists and developers always made a game that looked and sounded great. Unfortunately, on the development side, Konami always seemed to struggle with the fighting game genre, and Dragoon Might is no different. Now this game would definitely be a lot more interesting to play if it wasn't for the absolutely punishing difficulty. I have turned this down in the test menu to very easy, and unless there's a bug in the settings, this becomes exceedingly difficult to actually win a match even on the first round. The AI is absolutely predictive, knows exactly what you're going to do, seems to counter you every single time, and if you actually win the first round, it becomes so aggressive in the second and third rounds you can barely even get a hit in. Now it does have some interesting thought processes behind it though. Every stage has something that you can grab onto and hang from and swing from, so it does feel a little bit like the Outfoxies from Namco, which is a good comparison to make, but honestly I'd much rather play the Outfoxies. This kind of feels like Konami trying to make a Samurai Shodown game a la SNK and Neo Geo, but not having the same experience in the fighting game genre to be able to pull off what SNK always could. I will say all of the opponents, all of the characters are well designed, the artwork's great, the backgrounds are fun, and the music is always good because Konami never let us down on the music front. It's just the fact that the gameplay here does not match the rest of the package. Now as a two-player game, it's definitely going to be a lot more fun, but if you're here just to play against the CPU, be prepared to spend pretty much every single quarter you have in your pocket, and you're still probably not going to get past round 2. Unless it's just me and I don't click with this game, leave me a comment down below and tell me if you've ever played it and what you think. It does have a decent amount of violence, just like we talked about with Time Killers. Not going to be that high up on the violence list, but it does have a little bit of that Mortal Kombat aesthetic going on as well. And it does have a lot of moves, a lot of inputs, and a lot of different specials and buttons that you can deal with. The only thing, again, that I take issue with is every time I get ahead in a match, it seems like the AI suddenly becomes hyper-aggressive, knows everything I'm going to do, and almost cheats its way into a victory when I feel like I was way ahead. But it is a fun game in spite of that. If you bring a second player along, there is a lot of interest to be had here, and it's all down to that hanging mechanic in the stages. You're going to see those hang points, you can swing around on them and you can attack. And someone like Saramaru here, who walks around on knives on his feet, that is definitely a really fun design and look. And that's why this game is so unfortunate. It had all the hallmarks of being a really fun experience, maybe not living up to the Mortal Kombats or Samurai Shodowns of the world, but being a very close tier below those. Unfortunately, it is just the difficulty that always seems to get me in this game. I did get a win off here, and now in the next round I'm absolutely going to get destroyed. That just seems to be what happens every single time I try to play this game and get better at it. The minute you feel like you're getting ahead, the game decides, screw you, you have got to die no matter what you do. It doesn't seem like I can block any of the attacks, it just seems like it is guaranteed to take my credit and make me use another continue. Because you'll see here, I can barely even get off the ground before the enemy's already got some more hits on me, taking off more of my health bar. But I do like this kind of morning fog aesthetic in the background, with that dithering pattern being the fog on the ground, and you get a lot of good parallax scrolling, and that monkey hanging from the trees is a fun look as well. And it does have really good scaling, and I said a great soundtrack. So go ahead and listen to that for like 45 seconds, I'll come back and tell you more about the game. The soundtrack 100% sounds inspired by Street Fighter and Samurai Shodown, while at the same time having that unique Konami flair. And I do mean it when I say I think Konami music, as far as arcade games are concerned, is some of the best of all time if you take every single game they ever released and kind of average it out. So in Dragoon Might, the music, I have absolutely no complaints about it whatsoever. And you will see here that it does also try to ape King of Fighters a little bit by using the 3 versus 3 team battle mechanic. It is the exact same game, but now you have 3 different players on your side, and you need to win 3 matches in a row to move on to the next round. So it's basically like the single player mode in KOF, except on a Konami game. And that's the interesting thing about Dragoon Might. It feels like it's trying to be a greatest hits compilation of other fighting games that came before. It's Street Fighter meets Samurai Shodown meets King of Fighters, but unfortunately it cannot rise to the level of any of those games. And it's just down to that difficulty again. It's one of those things. I want to play a fighting game, I want to be able to get better at it, I want a decent amount of balance so that I feel like I can actually do something. I didn't even get off the ground there, and I was attacked in the prone position, ending the match. So in some ways it almost feels more like a beat 'em up game where you can attack an opponent on the ground versus a fighting game where usually, unless you're staggered, you get up off the ground before somebody can stab you from the top, or at least that's kind of how I feel about it. But I do love the artwork in this stage, the parallax scrolling on that staircase making it look like it has a perspective. It 100% works in context of the game, and all of these different stylized effects in between rounds and all of the character portraits, those are all like 9 out of 10s in my opinion. And that's why Dragoon Might always disappoints me. This game could have been better than it was, and it didn't get to live up to that expectation and what the developers at Konami were probably capable of doing. And that's a really interesting thought. Konami basically made at least one arcade in every single genre, and they're most well known, at least in 2D, for their arcade beat 'em ups. They made some of the best beat 'em ups of all time, so it really makes you wonder what it was about the fighting game genre that always seemed to give Konami so much trouble. Because of all the greatest arcade fighting games of all time, if you look at a list, you're not really going to see Konami ever appear on that, which is really strange because obviously the developers made some of the most famous, most popular, and most well-remembered arcade games of all time. And I think it's just down to the fact that in this one genre, Konami always seemed like they were trying to reproduce somebody else's work and concept, whether it be Street Fighter, King of Fighters, Samurai Shodown, Virtual Fighter on the 3D side. It always felt like their fighting games are reactionary to something that has succeeded in the market versus being evolutionary or even creating its own vibe with some of their beat 'em up stuff. And I think that's why Dragoon Might feel super familiar, really frustrating, and also unique in its own way. If we move over to something like Monster Maulers, also from Konami, this is where they get it way more right, because this game is way more of a beat 'em up, a genre Konami was famous for, with a fighting game wrapped around it than it is a traditional fighting game. So if you do want one good Konami quote-unquote fighting game, Monster Maulers is going to be where you want to go. But let's move over to one more match so I can show it to you from the beginning as we roll in. It is just so frustrating to feel like no matter what you do, no matter what character you use, and whatever technique you try to appropriate, you're always going to get absolutely handled by your opponent when it is AI. Every single jump, every single duck, every single dash I take, it seems like there's always an instantaneous reaction from the CPU. And again, I am playing this game at the lowest difficulty, and it almost feels bugged in the same way that the Championship Edition of Street Fighter 2 is bugged, where very easy actually ends up being the hardest mode in the game. But if you have played this game, I'd be curious about your thoughts below. It has all the hallmarks of being super interesting, and I love the sprite scaling and the overall background scaling, along with being able to hang off objects in the arena. The only problem is, as far as a fighting game is concerned, it's okay if you bring a friend and if you play against the CPU. It is absolutely mind-bogglingly frustrating. You're gonna basically turn it off after like 5 minutes. But I do appreciate Konami always tried in the fighting game genre. They never had a hit, but they never gave up attempting it as long as they had arcade boards in arcades. Sure, that I'll have videos throughout the week. Janktoberfest will be back next week, and we are done. Bye-bye.